Hi, Namaste, Ellarigu Namaskara. Today we are going to be dealing with the chapter called as Plant Kingdom. This chapter deals with the different types of plants. They are grouped under specific classification. They're classified specifically. So we are going to get to know them, and we are going to get to know why they are grouped like that. What is the necessity for them to be grouped like that? What are the main characteristics that is easily recognizable in each? Like for example, when we say angiosperms flowering, they are the ones which are not flowering, and there are many more differences and similarities also, but we'll get to know that better. This term is a pretty common term, right? So you might have also heard of this term, cyanobacteria, which is also called as blue-green algae. We write it as BGA whenever we are writing blue-green algae, right? But one thing I would like to mention here is that this blue-green algae does not belong to algae. Algae is a classification system under plant kingdom, and this does not belong, and this does not belong under this. So why am I mentioning specifically that this does not belong under this, despite its name having an algae, is because the classification system did not always start with such a very clear-cut idea in mind that plant kingdom would have algae, these many five different things, and then it would have these many different things, and they would further branch into like this, and these many creatures are this, these creatures are this. So the whole creatures, this, that, this, this will come under that, that will come under this. This whole confusion, which boiled down to a situation where we understand things, started with a lot of grouping by different scientists and different experimentations, and this is our final result. And under this kingdom, we have these five phylums, right? So we are trying to let everyone know that the terms which were confused before, the things that were confused before, the things that were considered to be part of the plant kingdom are now, it has been boiled down and it has been understood that they are actually not part of the plant kingdom. And this is an example. See, just by the name you might get confused, right? And you might know one more thing. Plants are, the cells are special in the way that they have cell walls. Now you might know that animal cells, we do not have cell wall, but plants, they do have a cell wall. Their cells, they have a cell wall. That is a protective barrier. We'll get to know more about this in cell lesson. But why I'm mentioning this right now is because here you might see these kingdoms, right? These kingdoms, the organisms which had the cell walls. Now having a cell wall is not exclusive to this plant kingdom. Even other kingdoms, in other kingdoms, there were organisms that had cell walls. So what was the misconception back then? That ones which had this cell wall belonged to the plant kingdom. But now that we have understood that those organisms, they either belong to fungi, Monera or Protista, and not necessarily just because it has a cell wall, it has to belong to the plant kingdom. So this is understood. So before we move on, let's just quickly remember one thing, that cyanobacteria, also called as blue-green algae, is not necessarily an algae, so not necessarily part of the plant kingdom. Similarly, organisms which come under these three kingdoms, which do have a cell wall, are not necessarily part of the plant kingdom. And the plant kingdom is further divided into five phylums: algae, bryophytes, pterophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. Now here you can see that I have marked the angiosperms. The reason for this is because we understood about the classification system, and I mentioned how there was a bit of confusion, there was a bit of discussion and some situations, right? So we're going to further understand about how this classification, the whole concept, using this as an example. So let us discuss based on the angiosperms to understand more about this classification system. So let us understand the artificial classification system. This comes under what I mentioned that time regarding the angiosperms. Okay, so under this system, we are actually going to understand how some species are, which are closely related, how we are going to understand them and characterize them, basically separate them based on a few similar characteristics. To state this in a better manner, we understand the features like gross, superficial, morphological characters. Gross as in the overall, superficial as in the ones that are seen blatantly or not so very deeply, like superficial. How to mention it in a common example way is, when we consider the ocean, we can consider that the top level where the where everything is floating around, that can be considered as the superficial layer. But then when you consider that down below, that there is such a huge mass of water there, then that is not superficial. Okay, so superficial basically means on top, or very like you're skimming through it. And morphological characteristics means that we are considering the external anatomy. So, gross superficial morphological characters. Now, to understand this, we have mentioned some examples like habit, color, the number, and the shape of the leaves. Okay, so color, number, and the shape of the leaves, it's understandable. Habit also, you're going to understand that it means like habit, the habitat, but not completely. Habitat particularly means that where an animal has adapted itself to stay or live in a particular place or reproduce in a particular place. Habit can mean its current staying place or its current habiting place. Okay, as in the place where it is inhabiting. Now we're going to see the next point. That is, it is based on the vegetative or the andrecian structure, as in they are classified based on the vegetative and the andrecian structure. And now andrecian is the male part of the plants. Okay, like when you take a flowering plant, we are considering flowering plants, right? And response, in a flowering plant, say it is bisexual, then there are two parts. That is the andrecian part and the gynoecian part. Andrecian is the male part, male reproductive half, and the gynoecian is the female reproductive half. If you ever get confused between these two, just a very simple trick would be gynoecian G. G is for a girl, so it's like the female reproductive part, and the other one would obviously be the male one. So now, this structure regarding the andrecian structure, now that was given by Lynn. Now what does this Lynn mean? In living world, we saw that Carolus Linnaeus is the one who came up with this whole binomial nomenclature technique, and at the end of that name, Semangifera indica, since he is the one who has come up with it, we used to write .Lin, right? So I have just written Lin here so that we can recall that one point. But basically what I am trying to tell here is that the concept of this andrecian structure was given by Linnaeus. Now, the last point about this, which is actually a very controversial point that makes it not so well organized system, would be that this system considers vegetative characteristics and the sexual characteristics at an equal level. That is, we are considering the vegetative characteristics and sexual characteristics to go hand in hand and to have equal importance. But now that is not a very good assumption or a conclusion, because vegetative characteristics can vary depending on external factors or probably even internal factors. So how can we come to a conclusion that they can have equal importance when this is a varying factor, right? We really can't equate it to something like in math. You can't equate a variable number to a fixed constant. That wouldn't make sense, right? Similarly, this is the concept that we are going to understand, and I've marked it wrong here because it's not particularly wrong, but that's what makes this artificial classification system not so agreeable one and makes it a controversial one. So now we're going to move ahead and we're going to get to know about the next type of classification system. Now this is called as the natural classification system. Here we talked about gross superficial morphological characters, right? Now there we're going to get to know some more terms. Some more terms that will make us understand what and all the natural classification system includes and how it is very helpful for us to understand how it is a bit better than the artificial classification system, and it doesn't end there. Like we have many more. We have after the natural classification system. It's not like in a hierarchy or so. It's just that we went on discovering, we went on putting our minds to it, and went on making it better, and the innovation kept on going, right? So that way is just the next one. That's how I mean it. So after the natural one, we have the phylogenetic classification system, a very interesting one. After that, we have the cytotaxonomy, and we also have the chemotaxonomy. They all deal with the tools and the information that we have, and combining it, we are going to understand and classify these creatures and organisms and plants that we have around us in a better manner.